In the world of new work where 360-degree feedback is becoming a more and more acceptable and constructive way to give each other feedback. And it's this each other that can cause a little bit of discomfort, can't it? Because ultimately it feels awkward and icky to say something negative to somebody that you work with, right? And yet this is a golden opportunity to use your communication skills to the best of your ability. Hi, Corinne Wilhelm here from the Clever Together Communication Podcast. This show tells you all about how to communicate more intentionally and more internationally to take your career to the next level, whether you're a native speaker or not. 360 degrees feedback does give the organisation the opportunity to see somebody's performance from a range of different perspectives. That's something that they wouldn't be able to do if they had the conventional way of doing appraisals where it went from top to bottom. This means that you can see how somebody is performing not just as an expert in their own right, but also as a leader, as a team player. And it's this all-round perspective that will let an organisation grow. But where does it go wrong? And what can you do to make sure it goes right? The problem with review systems is that you need to strike a balance between a standardized, fair system and a system that gives a certain degree of flexibility because, we're not robots, right? So, each person perceives something in a different way, and there has to be enough boxes, enough options for you to express yourself freely. Now, if you're getting a very junior member of the staff to evaluate somebody above them, they might not have the experience to express themselves in a way that is eloquent. They might not understand the implications of what they are saying, and it might not be constructive in terms of building the organization as a whole and, doing the best for their own personal development. So whilst many companies find that 360-degree feedback makes sense and they're rolling that out, many organizations are actually finding in reality that it's not going as smoothly as they had anticipated. And I think the problems come back to when you're introducing this kind of multi-rater feedback process. And it is possible to do a good job of introducing a new program like this, but it has to be given the time and the energy and the thought process to really make it a really solid introduction, like an onboarding system, so that, they know how it works. And this matters because, nothing gets people's backs up as much as a change in the appraisal methods. So you have to be very, very sensitive about this, especially when you consider that your feedback has a direct impact developing as an individual within that organization, and of course going forward if you want to move to another company, because it will affect your confidence, right? If you've been evaluated in a way that doesn't paint you in the right light, then you're less likely to have the confidence to take your career to the next level or to take your business to the next level. So 360-degree feedback is a method that provides each employee with the opportunity to receive performance-related feedback from their supervisors and managers, but also from their peers, from staff members reporting to them, to co-workers, and even customers. So most 360-degree feedback tools are about self-assessment. So if 360-degree feedback allows each one of us to understand how we are contributing to the effectiveness of the organization as a whole, this feedback lets us see how other employees see us, not just the boss. So if you, as the boss, are viewed to be a tough evaluator, but other people also see that person in the same way, then you're off the hook. The feedback provides insights into the skills and behaviours, but there also needs to be total alignment with the company's mission and goals. The people who are chosen to rate or give feedback might not necessarily see the big picture if they're too low down in the organisation. What is the point of this 360-degree feedback? Well, the whole point really is to assist each individual to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are and what they can do to contribute insights into aspects of their work that maybe need some changes. Maybe there's a bottleneck that they want to share. Maybe there's a person on the team that is kind of putting a spanner in the works, It's not comfortable pointing the finger at other people, but if you can see that the organisation is struggling to grow as a result of this, then going into some kind of open, honest conversation is of course going to take an organisation in the right direction. Let's look at the pros and cons, shall we? Feedback from employees comes from a range of different directions, right? So it's not just from top to bottom. You're getting some sideward views, and it might be somebody that you've worked with on just one project, but on that project you were totally in the zone, right? You were like in your element, and that person is going to see you in a completely different light because you're doing something that you really enjoy, and that also should be a sign for the organisation. This person needs to be doing more of this, and that can be good for everyone, right? So the other upside is, that it develops and strengthens teamwork and accountability because everyone's looking out for each other more, and that has to be a good thing, right? And it also uncovers, these kind of procedural things, these kind of systems and processes that can really hinder the organisation as a whole, but also the employee's growth as an individual. Other things it looks at is things like, career development. If you have an introvert and there is no 360 degree, then that introvert's hopes and dreams to do something bigger and better in their career might completely stay under the radar. Whereas if you're talking to a group of people, that tends not to happen. Then it's no longer a big secret. And of course, bias and discrimination exist. We wish it didn't, but it does. We're all affected by situations that we've had in the past. Culture is a very, very complex thing, so we can't pretend to be completely unbiased all of the time. So it reduces that bias and the discrimination because what you're saying is being seen by other people, and it gives a more rounded, more solid feedback, if you like. But it also gives, a real insight to what the gaps in the training are, what the personal development requirements are of that individual. But of course there are downsides as well, right? So, it really only serves part of the overall performance measurement system. I think we have to be realistic about that it can cause organisational conflict, can't it, of course, if it's implemented in a haphazard, not very well thought out way. So if you're going to introduce 360 degrees, make sure that it's introduced in a very, very comprehensive and transparent way. And it can fail to add value if it's not really effectively woven into the existing performance procedures. It can prevent recipients from getting more information because the process is anonymous, right? So by focusing on employee weaknesses and shortcomings instead of strengths, which is a tendency if you don't have that experience and you don't have the big picture, then it can be a little bit negative. Using inexperienced raters can create a paradigm where people are like ganging up on someone. That can be a little bit toxic. And of course, it does require even more data collection, and that can slow down things even more. That, of course, is also an issue that you need to think about. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that your method gives the people involved an opportunity to give a really well-rounded feedback from a real broad range of people across the board throughout the hierarchy. So I'm thinking peers, reporting staff, co-workers, managers. And this has a clear advantage over just having feedback from one single individual. And make sure you provide a framework in which people can be open and express themselves freely, but also tight enough to zone in on different factors that will feed into your goals and mission. So, the 360-degree feedback can also save managers time because they're just one of many people. It means that it becomes less of a big thing to do. And let's face it, providing feedback on people, if you're going to do it professionally, and the feedback that they really need to drive their career forward, that takes time. So this co-worker perception is important. It puts less pressure on people, especially when you're evaluating somebody for the first time as a new boss. This can be really, really stressful. So how does it help teamwork? Well, due to the transparency around this, if you know that a member of your team has received negative feedback about X or Y, you can help them constructively with that. So this multi-rater feedback gives those team members, the opportunity to be more accountable to each other, to help each other, to share the knowledge that they have. And theoretically, it should improve the communication and the team development, which is what I'm seeing with agile teams that I'm working with, because they're used to giving feedback on a regular basis. So when it comes to doing some formal feedback, it doesn't seem like such a cringeworthy thing to do. And you might discover some great things from doing this. You may well discover what is it that keeps employees from working more successfully together. What are the organization's approaches or policies and procedures that are getting in the way of getting the job done, identifying those strengths and making sure that you make the time to actually address those issues. So for many reasons now, organizations are no longer responsible for developing the careers of their employees. So employees are having to take more and more responsibility for their own career development now. And so in startups, very often you get a training budget that you can choose to spend as you see fit to develop in your career. And of course, this multi-rater feedback provides excellent information upon which to base those decisions as to what they want to work on to improve their team building skills or whatever it is, not just from the boss. And many employees feel that 360-degree feedback is a more accurate reflection of their performance. Very often, it feels more validating than just having feedback from a supervisor, who rarely sees them actually getting the job done. So this makes the information more useful for the person building their career, but also more relevant for HR too, because they get to see the big picture. When it comes to discrimination, it might be race, it might be age, it might be gender, it doesn't matter. But if there's one person that has an issue with a millennial, just to take an example, it's based on a past experience, this can really skew the whole personal development process if they're the boss giving the feedback. So can you see how in a conventional system this could be magnified? So I think this is a really great thing about 360 feedback, because it does put that into perspective, and actually it's a good way of revealing some of those discriminations, and then you can offer that person some training or coaching. So 360-degree feedback also provides really solid information about the organization's training needs, and this way they will have the opportunity to plan for classes, online learning, introducing more knowledge management through cross-functional responsibilities and, on-the-job training or cross-training. So a 360-degree system does have a good side. However, 360-degree feedback can go really, really pear-shaped. When we're thinking about the negatives, just as an organization implements any change, the implementation of this type of feedback really does need to follow some effective change management guidelines, because this is going to affect everybody in the organization. So don't underestimate the sensitivities around this. it must be connected to the overall aims and goals of your organization. So if you've identified competencies or comprehensive job descriptions, give people feedback on what they should be doing, not them as a person. And make sure that it's connected to their competencies and their job duties, their responsibilities, and their role within the organization at large. And, this system will be a huge disaster if it's just an add-on, if it's just a nice to have, because that's what people are talking about. So if you're not going to follow this through, if you're not going to really have a decent onboarding system in place, if you're not going to think about change management, then please just don't touch 360-degree feedback. To get real feedback from people, you need to make it anonymous, right? So people receiving the feedback really have no way to go and ask that person a bit more about it, or to ask for specific examples or a specific situation in which they experience that, because that lets you, as the person being evaluated, kind of really understand what it is that you did. And if you think about that, you can normally trace your steps and think, yeah, my tone of voice was off there. I was tired. I was frustrated. I was fed up. Yeah, I get that. I probably wasn't on my best there. What could I have done to stop getting so tired? I should have maybe eaten something that day before the launch or whatever. So you don't have an opportunity as the person receiving feedback to go back and kind of deep dive on that particular feedback. That's why the role of coaching is so important for this, to assist people to really understand their feedback, to analyze that feedback, and put together an action plan based on what they've heard. And if your team is working internationally, then give them a choice of coaches working in different languages. Because remember, you can source coaches from all over the world. So give your staff the opportunity to speak in their own language with a native speaking coach. It's tempting, isn't it, when you give feedback to focus on the negatives and the weaknesses. I mentioned that last week. But I implore you, really focus on the employee's strengths and not their weaknesses. So much easier said than done, right? You might well know of situations where you have a client that is sucking up all of your time, and they're always wanting more, they're late to pay, these are the people that, we don't really like working with. And the thing is, you will tend to put all of your energy into that one person because they are frustrating the hell out of you. But actually, you need to turn that round. You need to focus on the people that love what you do, that are really getting results, that are bound to give you a great testimonial because they are in their element. They are learning every single day. They are getting to the root of this problem that's been holding them back. And it's the same with feedback. It's very tempting to focus on the negatives, but we need to really think about what makes that person shine. What makes them get into work a bit earlier? What gets them to really think about the problem? I work with tech guys, and one guy once said to me, going to work is like going to the playground. Every day I get to solve problems. Isn't that awesome? So you need to make sure that people like that are in their element, in their zone of brilliance. Everybody needs to have the opportunity to really be the best that they can be. And you can only do that if you're looking at the positives, what they do well, where they shine, where they smile and they're upbeat and they're getting stuff done and they're solving problems and they are taking your organization forward. So what about the inexperienced people? They're also an important part of giving feedback, right? So as a newbie to corporate life, it can be tempting to play down the negative feedback for someone who's been supportive, even though their accuracy, for instance, leaves a lot to be desired. It can feel disloyal, can't it? And likewise, somebody who isn't as successful as they would like to be might become rather mean. Or after a merger and acquisition, for example, you might find people clubbing together to help each other out. They might just go for the middle of the road every time because it feels safer. Those people that drive on the motorway in the middle? There are people like that in every organisation. They are the people who don't want to give too much. They don't want to give too little. They don't want to get into a conversation. It's all too much like conflict. There will always be some that play safe. And that's a problem because you need to be able to see problems and performance. So you need to really make sure that there is a system that encourages people to avoid that middle of the road. Give them a process, a framework in which to give feedback that makes sense. And honesty and openness should be the very core of this. But if the culture is off whack, it won't be there. If, for example, you're going through a merger, then maybe the culture of the organisation isn't quite what it used to be, in which case you definitely need to have a system in place that's going to capture that. And remember, feedback, whether it's 360 degrees or not, is all about communication. So if you don't have the maturity to communicate effectively and honestly, but considerately, in a way that you're going to pick people up and make them feel appreciated and understood, then you're going to struggle with this. So if you haven't listened to the last episode, please listen to that. If it really goes pear-shaped, it can really sap morale. It can put a dent in motivation. And it can create conflict between employees. It can really create scenarios that are really uncomfortable. So be careful about who you're getting involved and if they understand their responsibility. Be careful. Think this through. And, learn from other organisations. Ask them what went well, what didn't go well. They'll probably give you some honest feedback. Really ask yourself, is our organisation ready for this? And if not, what can I do to get them ready? And when am I going to introduce it? Because without effective change management strategies, this is a project that is going to really backfire. So if you're going to introduce 360-degree feedback, please do it properly or not at all. So what about you? Have you ever experienced 360-degree feedback or a version of 360-degree feedback? Because sometimes these systems are delivered in vanilla, aren't they? Like a little bit 360 or a little bit agile. If it's like a watered down version, then that can be a little bit frustrating too, because you don't really know what you're looking at. So to sum up then, 360-degree feedback, just like regular feedback, is all about being honest but kind. Lead with the positives, make it constructive, be respectful, and make yourself available. Of course, in 360 degrees feedback, there's a certain degree of anonymity, right? Although your language might give you away in the open questions. But be specific. Think about specific skills that will boost that person's professionalism. Failure to deliver on time might come down to a lack of planning or inadequate systems, taking on too much, or simply not being able to say no. Assertiveness or time management might be the training requirement that they need, the focus that they need to get on track in terms of their career. So how can your feedback help them to thrive? Offer specific situations, and if they ask for it, specific advice. It's about performance, not the person. Talking about what you noticed, what you felt, what you saw, what you realised. And being vague if somebody does approach you for personal feedback isn't really helping them. Being vague for fear of hurting somebody's feelings might well make them feel like a lost cause. Whereas if you give them a tip that's quick and easy to try out, they'll make a transition faster, and that momentum will get them performing faster. So a series of small steps and being open to their updates will get them to make a big difference in the organisation. That's gold. And compliments boost confidence. Feedback boosts their follow through. So the communication around 360 degrees feedback is complex, but the results of effectively introduced and delivered 360-degree feedback is phenomenal. If you can get your team to perform well as a result of 360 degrees of feedback, then you have a great future in front of you for you and your team. That's it for today. Have a look at your 360-degree feedback program at work. See if it's working well. See if there's any changes that you can make. See if there's anything you could optimize, because constructive feedback is always appreciated. Approach your HR about it and be prepared to be a great giver of feedback, whether it's in the written version, formally or informally. Make yourself approachable, make yourself the leader. And I'll see 17 of you this Friday for the Fun with Words Haiku webinar. The link for the sign up is in the show notes. And the rest of you will have to wait until next week. Be brilliant and be the very best communicator that you can be. It's Corinne Wilhelm from the Clever Together Communication podcast, brought to you by English speaking experts. Take care now.